Okay, so now we're continuing here in the text of An-Nasafiyyah. قال المؤلف رحمه الله والكلام, in speech. But let's check the metin and review the flow of information there. So we're on page 110 here. Let's go to the metin. So here he says, وَلَهُ صِفَاتٌ أَزَلِيَّةٌ قَائِمَةٌ بِذَاتِهِ. He has attributes eternal, existing by his being. وَهِيَ لَا هُوَ وَلَا غَيْرُهُ. And they are not him nor something else. They are neither him nor something else. وهي العلم والقدرة والحياة والقوة والسمع والبصر والإرادة والمشيئة. And they are knowledge, qudra, power, life, quwwah, power, hearing, sight, irada, will, and mashi'ah, will. The Shaykh said these are the most important attributes to know before he mentioned fear. And we saw that all of these are ma'ani attributes that are mentioned here. This is 6 of 7 ma'ani attributes if we want to talk about the consensus. Or 6 out of 8 ma'ani attributes if we count everlastingness as one of them according to the strong saying. So which one is the 7th? Kalam, right here. So before he got to Kalam, he mentioned doing or acting and creating and providing, which these are attributes of doings. Attributes of doings. These 6 before those are attributes of the self, and they are ma'ani attributes. Out of the attributes of the self, they are the category called ma'ani. Then these are doings. Doings are eternal attributes according to the Maturidis. Doings are eternal attributes according to the Maturidis. The attributes of the self are eternal attributes according to the Maturidis, and the attributes of doings are eternal attributes. The attributes of the self are eternal attributes by consensus, and the attributes of doings are eternal attributes according to the Maturidis. And then he mentioned after these doings the attribute of the self, which is kalam. It's interesting here that the Shaykh said that these 6 are the most important attributes to know. And take note that he didn't say there are no other attributes that are of this category, the category that means the most important attributes to know. He didn't say actually these 6 are the only ones that have this status. He just said these are, he didn't say 6, he just said these. These are the most important attributes to know, he said. It happens that all of these are the ma'ani attributes minus 1, which then the other one is kalam, minus 1 if we don't include everlastingness. So is kalam then one of the most important attributes to know, like these 6? So I didn't hear this expression like this. But we do know that the science of the creed was called Ilmul Kalam. It was named after the Kalam because of all the discussion about the Kalam. So, it's a very important attribute to know. If you don't understand this issue, then you'll be confused about some things. Allah knows best. And also, yani, there's a question here. Why did he separate these? Now, I had a question before, which was, why did he mention Qudrah and Quwwah? Two names for the same attribute, and Iradah and Mashi'ah, two names for the same attribute. I didn't ask, but I did realize, though, that there is a benefit. I mentioned that for you. There is a benefit in doing so, which is a benefit that we learned, which is there is a signal there too that some attributes have more than one name. Not just these, some other ones too. Now, another question. Why did he separate Kalam from these six? And just not mention all the 7 Ma'ani attributes in a row? Allah knows. But, subhanallah, something occurs to me, which is that these attributes are eternal attributes. All of these are eternal attributes according to the author. So all these, from when he says al-ilm until he says al-kalam, they all have something. They have a judgment. They share a judgment, which is, they are, according to the Maturidis, all eternal attributes. And also, Al-Kalam has a lot of details, and the scholars do single out the case that's detailed from among other cases. So, An-Nasafiyyah said, Wal Kalam here. So this is where we are in the Matan. So let's go back up to the explanation. So he says, Wal Kalam, and speech, SharH, the explanation. Al-Kalamu sifatun azaliyah. Speech is an eternal attribute. عُبِّرَ عَنْهَا بِالنَّظْمِ الْمُسَمَّى بِالْقُرْآنِ وَبِالتَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ وَالزَّبُورِ وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْكُتُبِ الْمُنَزَّلَةِ. This eternal attribute was referred to, or was expressed, in that arrangement that's called Al-Quran. Means that composition that's called Al-Quran in Arabic language, it refers to the speech of God, which is his eternal attribute that's not Arabic. It is what God says, but not that he says it in Arabic. And that same attribute was referred to by the Torah, the original Torah, and the Injil of Jesus, the Torah that was revealed in Hebrew, and the Injil of Jesus that was revealed in Aramaic or Assyrian. And the Zabur that people call Psalms with the silent P, Psalms, also revealed in Hebrew, and other revealed books. It's one speech, that speech of God, and he revealed numerous books to different prophets in various languages without him, without his speech itself being any of those languages. Rather, those revealed expressions refer to this or express this eternal speech, uncreated speech of God. Those revealed books are created. فالكتب المنزلة عبارات عن كلام الله. And so, the revealed books are expressions of God's speech. الذي هو صفة أزلية أبدية. That speech which is an eternal, everlasting attribute. قائمة بذات الله. Existing by God's being. ليست مقترنة بالزمن. And it's not associated with time. فهو غير العلم. So it is not knowledge. This speech is not knowledge. وغير الإرادة. And it's not will. لأنه تعالى قال. Because he, the exalted, said, إنما قولنا لشيء إذا أردناه أن نقول له كن فيكون. Merely, our saying to something when we willed for it is that we say to it, be, and it is. فعلمنا مغايرة القول للإرادة. By this verse of the Quran, we know that there's a difference between God's will and his speech. What God wills and what God says. This verse teaches us the difference between what God wills and what God says. That he has a saying and he has a will, and that those are two different attributes. وَكَذَلِكَ الْكَلَامُ غَيْرُ الْعِلْمِ. And likewise, knowledge, and likewise, speech is not knowledge. إِذْ قَدْ يُخْبِرُ الْإِنسَانُ عَمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُهُ. Since a person could tell about something that he does not know. بَلْ يَعْلَمُ خِلَافَهُ. In fact, he would know contrary to it. كما أنه قد يأمر بما لا يريده. Just as he could also command what he doesn't want to happen. He could tell someone to do something that he doesn't want to actually happen, although he told them to do it. كمن يأمر عبده قصدا إلى إظهار عصيانه قصدا إلى إظهار عصيانه وعدم امتثاله لأمره. Like for someone to give directions to his slave. For someone to give directions to his slave intending to expose his disobedience. And intending to expose his lack of compliance to his command. وَلَيْسَ قَصْدُهُ أَنْ يَنْفَذَ هَذَا الشَّيْء. And it's not his intention, the intention of the commander, that this thing would be done, would be fulfilled. إِنَّمَا قَصْدُهُ أن يظهر للناس أنه مخالف لسيده لا يطيعه. Merely his intent is to show to the people that he is disobedient to his master and does not obey him. فائدة, benefit. الأمر خير الإرادة. The amr, the command, the directive is different from the will. وقالت المعتزلة إن الأمر هو الإرادة. And the Mu'tazila said that the directive is God's will. فعندهم كل ما أمر الله به فقد أراده. So according to them, everything that God commanded, He willed. وقع أو لم يقع, whether it happened or not. لذلك قالوا, that's why they said, أمر الله تعالى عباده بالإيمان. God commanded His slaves to believe. وقد شاء وقوعه منهم. وَقَدْ شَاءَ وُقُوعَهُ مِنْهُمْ. And He willed for that to happen to them. وَلَكِنْ لَمْ يَقَعْ مِنَ الْجَمِيعِ. وَلَكِنْ لَمْ يَقَعْ مِنَ الْجَمِيعِ. However, it didn't happen to all of them. بَلْ وَقَعَ مِنْ بَعْضٍ. Rather, it happened to some of them. وَهُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Those are the believers. وَلَمْ يَقَعْ مِنْ بَعْضٍ. It didn't happen to some. They're saying, although God willed it, He commanded it and willed it, but it didn't happen to some of them. وَهُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And they are the kafirs, the blasphemers. So there the Shaykh digressed. He wanted to talk about the command and the will under the heading of speech. But because he told the difference between speech and will, and the difference between speech and knowledge. So he wanted to give a benefit, and that's exactly what he said. Fa'ida, benefit. So that amounts to saying digression. And then he told us the difference between God's will and God's directive. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. وهو متكلم بكلام هو صفة له أزلية. And he is a speaker by speech that is an attribute of his eternal. ليس من جنس الحروف والأصوات. It is not of letters. It is not some type of letters and sounds. It is not some type of letters and sounds. وهو صفة منافية للسكوت والآفة. And it is an attribute negating of speechlessness and defect. It is an attribute negating of speechlessness and defect. I don't want to say here silence. Maybe someone might translate that as negating of silence. Not that that's necessarily wrong though, because his speech is not a silence, but it's not a sound either. When we say it's not a sound, doesn't mean it's a silence. But I'm going to say speechlessness and defect. Why would speechlessness be a defect? Because he's alive. SharH, the explanation is that أن الحروف أعراض حادثة. Letters are properties, created properties. So that's to say, a letter, then its reality doesn't have atoms and it doesn't fill a space. Letters are eventual properties, created properties. مشروط لحدوثها حدوث بعضها بانقضاء البعض. They are created properties whose createdness depends on. They are created properties whose createdness depends on some of them happening after others finish. لأن امتناع التكلم بالحرف الثاني بدون انقضاء الحرف الأول بديهي. Because the impossibility of speaking with the second letter without the first letter finishing is known intuitively. So we can add that to things that are intuitive. We want to list some things. If we talked about the issue of badiha, intuition. فهذا شيء معقول بالضرورة. This is something conceived by necessity. بلا تفكير, without having to think about it. يعني here Shaykh is solidifying. He is doubling down and saying there's no way you can say two letters at a time. فإذا قلت بسم الله, and so if you were to say Bismillah, or in the name of God, for example, if we want to translate it, still works in translation. And so if you were to say, in the name of God, فَمَعْلُومٌ أَنَّ الْبَاءَ تَأْتِي, يعني, then it's known that the first letter in Arabic, if we say Bismillah in Arabic, the first letter, which is the ba, comes, ثُمَّ تَنْقَضِي, and then it finishes, ثُمَّ تَأْتِي السِّين. So that first letter, which is the ba, it comes and then goes. And then the sin comes, ثُمَّ تَنْقَضِي, and then it goes. ثُمَّ تَأْتِي الْمِيم, and then the meme comes and then it goes. So easy to not translate here. وهكذا, etc. والله تعالى منزه عن أن تقوم به صفات حادثة. And Allah, exalted is He, is clear from created attributes happening to Him, or from created attributes existing by His being. Yani He wouldn't have created attributes. فهؤلاء المشبهة ويقال لهم الصوتية لا يبالون بإطلاق هذا القول. And so those God comparers, and they are called, meaning in this topic, as-sawtiyah, that means the people who believe that God has a voice. They don't care about saying this, saying. They don't care about talking like this. They don't mind to talk like this. Like if you heard some of those recordings of those Wahhabis, like that Somali guy who talks real fast. Like, you wonder, how can he dare just say those things so easy, so horrible? فالمخالفون لأهل الحق في قولهم ليس من جنس الحروف والأصوات هم مجسمة الحنابلة. So before that, really quick. So the Shaykh said, here in this case, they're called Sawtiyah because of the topic we're dealing with here. Those are the Sawtiyah. If we were talking about God existing without a place, then those opponents are called Jihawiyah, people who believe in God's direction, according to them. فالمخالفون لأهل الحق في قولهم ليس من جنس الحروف والأصوات هم مجسمة الحنابلة. So the opponents of the people of the truth in the topic of saying that God's speech is not some sort of letters and sounds, they are the anthropomorphists who affiliate themselves with the Hanbali school. Ibn Taymiyyah, like Ibn Taymiyyah, wa unasin sabaquhu, and some people who came before him. مثل القاضي أبي يعلى, like Judge Abu Ya'la. Who's this Judge Abu Ya'la? You might hear his name if you are a student of knowledge or a scholar. You'd hear his name. Judge Abu Ya'la, we have here, says he is Abu Ya'la Muhammad, son of Al-Hussein, son of Muhammad, son of Khalaf al-Farra al-Baghdadi, from Baghdad. Hafiz ibn al-Athir said in Al-Kamil about the events of the year 429, quote, وفيها أنكر العلماء على أبي يعلى بن الفراء الحنبلي. In that year, the scholars objected to Abu Ya'la ibn al-Farra the Hanbali ما ضمنه كتابه من صفات الله سبحانه وتعالى المشعرة بأنه يعتقد التجسم. They objected to him for what he included in his book about the attributes of God. Exalted and glorified is he, that give the impression that he believes in anthropomorphism. Intaha, end quote. And he also said about the events of the year 458. وفيها توفي أبو يعلى الفراء. In that year, Abu Ya'la al-Farra al-Hanbali, the Hanbali, passed away. وهو مصنف كتاب الصفات. He is the author of the book of attributes. أتى فيه بكل عجيبة. In that book, he did everything strange. وترتيب أبوابه يدل على التجسيم المحض. And the sequence of his chapters proves pure anthropomorphism. Ta'ala Allahu an dhalik. Exalted is Allah from that. Intaha, end quote. Yeah, but you're going to hear, he's going to be quoted though. Just like sometimes Ibn Taymiyyah is quoted. Suyuti quoted Ibn Taymiyyah. It doesn't mean he's reliable though. Wabni Zaghuni, and Ibn Zaghuni, who's he? Says here, he is Ali ibn Ubaidillah ibn Nasr Az-Zaghuni, the Hanbali. He's called Abul Hasan. He was born in the year 455 and he passed away on the 17th night of Muharram in the year 527. He's the one that Ibn al-Jawzi refuted. Wal-Karramiyah, and the Karramis, you know who they are. Those are the followers of Ibn Karram. This Ibn Karram, he was a student of Imam Ahmad, and he was a student of some other mujtahids. Then he went away to where there were no scholars, and he showed himself to be a man detached from the world, and he taught the people kufr. He taught them tajseen. And they believed that Allah was over the throne. And I find the story of the Karramiyah a great refutation for the Wahhabis, because Wahhabis claim that their creed is the creed of the Salaf. But the Salaf deemed the Karramiyya as kuffar. The Karramiyya believed like the Wahhabis believe. From what I know personally, the Wahhabis have more details than the Karramiyya, and the Karramiyya committed kufr. Talking about in that issue, both of them have things special to them also. Things Wahhabis talked about that the Karramis didn't, and vice versa. So I don't know how detailed, how far they went. And maybe it's just only my lack of, from what I have learned. Anyway, the Salaf deemed those people kuffar for that conviction. So it's not the case that they were believing that Allah was over the throne. So, يقولون, they say, كلامه تعالى عرض من جنس الأصوات والأعراض. His speech, exalted is he, is a property of some sort of letters and of some sort of sounds. Is a property of some sort of sounds. وَالْأَعْرَاض لَا غَيْرٍ, and nothing more. It's some sort of sounds and properties, not more. وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ قَدِيمٌ, and they said, despite that, though, it is eternal. فَهَؤُلَاءِ كَأَنَّهُمْ لَمْ يَفْهَمُوا مَعْنَى الْقَدِيمِ. So those people, it's like they didn't understand what eternal means. قال الشيخ أبو منصور البغدادي في تفسير الأسماء والصفات. Shaykh Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi said in his book, Tafsir al-Asma'i was-Sifat, the tafsir, the interpretation of the names and the attributes. Ma nasuhu, quote, wa amma ashabuna. Now, as for our companions, as for our colleagues, فأجمعوا, or I'll just translate it as colleagues for now. فأجمعوا على أن كلام الله عز وجل أزلي. They have an agreement that the speech of God, invincible and great, is eternal. وأنه لم يزل متكلما, and that he never ceased to be a speaker. واختلفوا في وصفه بالصدق, and they differed about his being described with truthfulness or honesty. I don't find a difference between those. هل هو من صفاته الأزلية? Okay, so he says, we Ahlul Sunnah, I'm summarizing here, we agree that God's speech is eternal. All Ahlul Sunnah agree to that. And that he never ceased to be a speaker. But they differed. When we want to describe him as truthful or honest, because we do say indeed that God is truthful. Unless the word honest has some hint of an emotion in it. If honest has emotion in it, then we don't want that one for Allah Ta'ala. I'll just say truthful. هل هو من صفاته الأزلية? Is truthfulness one of his eternal attributes? أم من صفاته الفعلية التي استحقها عند وجود بعض أفعاله? Or is it amongst his action attributes that were applicable upon the existence of some of his doings? So this is a talk of Ash'aris here. Because the Maturidis don't say that his attributes of actions were applicable when something happened. The Maturidis refute the Ash'aris for this, not deeming them as kafirs though, and not deeming them as deviants. When I say they refute them, means they don't agree with them and they take this point as wrong. Yani saying this here that this is among his attributes of doings that became applicable upon his doing something. That's contrary to what Tahawi says. When Tahawi says, له معنى الخالق ولا مخلوق, or the like. I don't now remember how he said it. When Al-Tahawi said Allah Ta'ala is he is the Khaliq, he is creator without a creation. That means he's saying the name creator didn't become applicable when he did something. Rather, he's creator without doing anything. So this is Ash'ari talk here. So he says, our colleagues, they agree. So maybe he means here the Ash'aris. Maybe he's not talking here about the Maturidis at all. When he says, Ashabuna, though the Maturidis and Ash'aris are brothers. They are like blood brothers. وَأَمَّا أَصْحَابُنَا, so as for our colleagues, they have agreed that that God's speech, invincible and great, is eternal, and that he never ceased to be a speaker. And they differed about his attribute of truthfulness. Is it amongst his eternal attributes, or is it an action attribute? Is it one of his action attributes that became applicable when he did something? لاختلافهم في جواز خطاب المعدوم. And why did they differ about this? Their difference is based on their differing about the validity of addressing the non-existent. Is it valid to address the non-existent? فمن أجازه وبه قال أبو الحسن الأشعري. So whoever says it is valid to address the non-existent, and that is what Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari said, then whoever takes this position says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ لَمْ يَزَلْ مُخْبِرًا صَادِقًا. Indeed, God, invincible and great, never ceased to be a teller, a truthful teller. He never ceased to be a truthful teller in eternity. He was in eternity a truthful teller. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُجِزْ مِنْهُمْ خِطَابَ الْمَعْدُومِ. And any of them who did not validate addressing the non-existent, قَالَ إِنَّ كَلَامَهُ لَمْ يَزَلْ مَوْجُودًا. They said his speech never ceased to be existent. Yani, it is indeed beginningless. وَلَمْ يَزَلْ هُوَ مُتَكَلِّمًا بِهِ. And he never ceased to be a speaker by it. إِلَّا أَنَّ ذَلِكَ الْكَلَامِ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي الْأَزَلِ أَمْرًا وَلَا نَهْيًا وَلَا خَبَرًا. However, that speech that we have confirmed to be eternal was not eternally a directive or a prohibition or an information. وإنما صار أمرا ونهيا وخبرا عند وجود المخاطبين وإسماعهم الخطاب. And that rather these words became applicable to the speech. So the speech, it was then, so I'll just translate it literally first. He says, it merely became a command and a prohibition and a telling upon the existence of the addressees and their hearing the address. So the word sara here does not mean it changed. He's saying these words weren't applicable. Until the addressees existed. until the addressees existed, and wa isma'ihim, and they were made to hear. Al-khitab. Until the addressees existed and were made to hear the address. وبه قال أبو العباس القلانسي وليس يجوز على هذا المذهب أن يقال. And it's not valid according to this way that it be said إن خبره حادث, his telling is created. ولا إن صدقه حادث, nor to say his truthfulness is created. لأن صدقه وخبره كلامه, because his truthfulness and his telling is his speech. وكلامه أزلي, and his speech is eternal. ولكن يقال إن كلامه صار خبرا وصدقا عند وقوع الإسماع. Rather, it is said his speech became, so Sara means became. This doesn't mean change though. It means these words became applicable and the speech itself didn't change. But just translating the sentence literally, rather it is said that his speech became a telling and truthful upon the occurrence of the isma'. Isma' means making hear. Making hear. وصار هذا كما نقول, and this is like how we say إن الله عز وجل صار خالقا عند وجود الخلق. Indeed, Allah, invincible and great, became creator upon the existence of the creation. So that's all Ash'ari talk, not Maturidi talk. وَلَا نَقُولُ إِنَّ الْخَالِقَ حَادِث. And we don't say though, so the Ash'aris are saying, even though we say that, we don't say that the creator is created. They're saying that's when the word became applicable. So Shaykh takes by what's in Tahawi and by what's in what's in Tahawi and what those Hanafis and Maturidis say here. وهذان الفريقان من أصحابنا متفقان على استحالة الكذب على الله عز وجل. And these two groups of our colleagues, the Ash'aris, became clear that this is the Ash'aris, are in agreement to the impossibility of lying, of attributing lying to God, the invincible and great. إِلَّا أَنَّهُمَا اخْتَلَفَا, but they did differ about something. فِي طَرِيقِ اسْتِحَالَتِهِ, they differed about what makes it impossible. فَذَهَبَ الْقَلَانِسِي إِلَى التَّقْبِيحِ وَالتَّحْسِينِ مِنْ جِهَةِ الْعَقْلِ. Al-Qalanisi, he took the position of what the mind, that this is impossible because it is what the mind, it is included in the cases of what the mind deems ugly or deems good. وقال الكذب نقص من جهة العقول. He said lying, it is a deficiency intellectually. Like he's basically saying, if you were to call someone a liar, that would be a dispraise. He's saying you can't call someone a liar and it's praise. So he's saying it's intrinsically, it is in meaning deficiency. وَالنَّقَائِصُ مُسْتَحِيلَةٌ عَلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And deficiencies are impossible for God, invincible and great. كَمَا أَنَّ الْجَهْلَ نَقْصٌ, just as ignorance is deficiency. وَالْعِلْمَ مَدْحٌ, and knowledge is praiseworthy. وَالْعَجْزَ نَقْصٌ, and weakness is deficiency. وَالْقُدْرَةَ مَدْحٍ, and power is praise. Yani he's saying there's some meanings that the human being conceives to be imperfections. He wouldn't even accept to attribute it to himself or for it to be attributed to him. Yani, that statement's taken into its proper context. Yani, like, for example, if someone says, your mother's ugly, so it's not a praise. So like that, if it's said, for example, you're ignorant, this is not a praise. Or you are weak. فاستحال وصفه بالجهل والعجز ووجب وصفه بضدهما. And so it is impossible to attribute to him ignorance and weakness, and therefore necessary to attribute to him their opposites. وهما العلم والقدرة, which are knowledge and power. كذلك لما كان الصدق مدحا والكذب ذما. So like that, or likewise, when it was that truthfulness was praiseworthy and lying is blameworthy, وجب وصفه بالصدق, then it's necessary to that he be described with truthfulness. واستحال وصفه بالكذب, and it would be impossible to describe him with lying. وقال أبو الحسن الأشعري, and Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari said, إن الكذب إنما استحال عليه من جهة أن الصدق من صفاته الأزلية. Abu al-Hasan said, what makes lying impossible, or lying is merely impossible from the perspective of truthfulness being one of his eternal attributes. وكل صفة أزلية استحال وصفه بأضدادها. And every eternal attribute, or any eternal attribute, and any eternal attribute, it is impossible that he would be attributed with its opposite. التي هي الجهل والعجز والموت. Those opposites such as ignorance and weakness and death. وقال أيضا, and he also said, إن وصف البارئ عز وجل بالقدرة على كذب يصير به كاذبا محال. He also said, indeed, describing the originator, the invincible and great, with the power to lie, a power to lie by which he would be a liar, is impossible. وَإِنْ كَانَ هُوَ الَّذِي يَخْلُقُ كَذِبِ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Although it is he who creates the lie of the liars. كَمَا أَنَّ وَصْفَهُ بِالْقُدْرَةِ عَلَى مَوْتٍ أَوْ عَجْزٍ أَوْ حَرَكَةٍ يَصِيرُ هُوَ بِهِ مَيِّتًا. That might be مَيْتًا. يَصِيرُ بِهِ مَيْتًا or مَيِّتًا, I'm not sure. أو عاجزا أو متحركا محال. Just as that his being described with the power, with power over death and weakness and motion, by which he would be then described as dead or weak or moving, is impossible. وَإِنْ كَانَ هُوَ الَّذِي يَخْلُقُ مَوْتَ الْأَمْوَاتِ. Although it is he who creates the death of the dead ones. وَعَجْزَ الْعَجَزَةِ, and the weakness of the weaklings. وَحَرَكَاتِ الْمُتَحَرِّكَاتِ, and the movement of the moving things. وَالْعِلَّةُ فِي ذَلِكَ كُلِّهِ أَنَّ كُلَّ صِفَةٍ أَزَلِيَّةٍ يَسْتَحِيلُ وَصْفُهُ بِضِدِّهَا. And the consistent reasoning here in all of this is that any eternal attributes that's confirmed, any confirmed eternal attribute, it is impossible that he would be described with its opposite. وبالقدرة على أن يخلق لنفسه ضدها وإن قدر على خلق ضدها لغيره. And it is impossible that he would be described with the power to create it in himself, to create in himself the opposite of such an attribute, such an eternal attribute, though he has the power to create that in others. وكل ما استحال وصفه بالقدرة عليه استحال وصفه بالعجز عنه. And anything that it's impossible to describe him with power over it, it's also impossible to describe him with weakness from it. لأن ما يستحيل كونه مقدورا له استحال كونه معجوزا عنه. Because anything that's impossible to be under his power is also impossible to be something that deems him weak. Is also impossible to be something that deems him weak. That's very nice words he's saying here. Yeah, and he's saying something we learned before, but he's saying it in a very nice way, if you're following. فهذا قول أصحابنا في وجوب صدق البارئ عز وجل في خبره. And so this is the saying of our Ash'ari colleagues about the necessity of truthfulness, the necessity of the truthfulness of the originator, the invincible and great in his telling. وفي إحالة الكذب عليه, and about the impossibility of attributing lying to him. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We'll stop there. Any question? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, Shaykh. It's in the talk of that there are attributes that are just non-befitting and intuitively known. How does that? How do we reconcile that with that? The Muslims, we say that what is halal, what is good, is what Allah reveals is good. Is my question clear?
Yes. I haven't heard the answer to that.
Barakallahu feekum.
I mean, Wafiq, but if someone claims that this is mental judgment, then it's going to mean that the religion wouldn't oppose that.
I see.
طيب. Barakallahu feekum. Wa alaikum assalam.
I didn't hear the question. What was the question so I can hear it, understand?
Yes, so the question is, don't we say that the religion is what deems something good or bad? Yes, we do say that. So, for example, in the law of Adam, a man could marry his sister if she wasn't his twin, and that was good. And now, if someone marries his sister, it's not valid, and it's very bad. So, yeah, we say that. So, then didn't we say here that some of them are saying that there are attributes that are known intrinsically to be dispraised or blameworthy? That's what he's arguing, because he said it's known that ignorance is blameworthy and weakness is blameworthy or dispraised rather. And that ignorance is dispraised and weakness is dispraised and lying is dispraised. He's saying this is known intuitively. Anyone would know it. You're not going to call someone a liar and say that's a good thing. So how's that? How could it be intuitively known? So what I said to him is, I haven't heard the answer to this, but if someone's going to argue that knowing that this is dispraised is intuitive, or that it is a definitive mental judgment, if that's going to be his argument, then he would then respond that the religion's not going to come with anything contrary to that.
Okay, I got that. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.